Okay, I think it's 6 o'clock, so we want to get started, get everything organized. And welcome to the Community Forum. Look, am I not louder? I got it on. Am I loud enough now? It's the green light's on.
Just talk very close to it.
Hello. Hey. After telling all the candidates what to do. Okay, anyway, welcome to our community forum, and thank you all for coming. And we're glad that we could open it up so people could be here live and in person. And I'm Barbara Burrell, and the chairperson for the League of Women Voters Voter Services Program in Brunswick County. So we're doing 5 forums around the county this session, so it's pretty good that we're very excited about it. Let me just tell you a couple of rules. These are pretty easy. First, turn off your phones. Everybody's phones off, okay? And during the forum, there's no clapping, no hissing, no booing, no cheering. Just be quiet and give them good vibes. And at the end, we'll give them all a big clap, okay? So we want to make that. And Sue Marsh and Martha Johnson are our timekeepers here. So we've got a little iPad that will tell them when beep, it's over, your time is over. Okay. And our moderator tonight is Randy Alexander from WWAY. I think this is at least the 3rd time you've done it. Randy Aldridge. I'm sorry. I get all mixed up. Anyway, Randy Aldridge. Okay. And I want to very much thank the town officials, especially Randy and his crew, who have put this all together and made sure that it works. And also, just very briefly, you all got these little Vote 411 cards, and you might have wondered, what are these? This is a project of the National League of Women Voters, and every candidate in every state for the municipal elections got a notice asking them to participate. They could go online. Some of you have done this, some of you have not, and put your picture in.
Are you ready? All right. So we're going to start with the incumbent mayor, Joe Pat Hayden. You get 2 minutes now for your introduction.
Thank you, Randy, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this forum. I want to thank everyone for being here. Sometimes it takes me 2 minutes just to say hello to someone in the ER. So I just basically want to tell you who I am. I'm a doctor. I've been here 36 years working at Dozier Hospital. And the reason that I want to continue to be your mayor is because I love the opportunity to serve the citizens. I love this city. I love the citizens. We have been together a long time. And with my experience, my record of accomplishment, my willingness to work hard for each and every citizen in our community, one of the reasons that I feel like I'm still the right person for the job. My education, UNC graduate, medicine, public health, undergraduate, University of Notre Dame, a broad educational background. I love working with our city employees. I feel like we have a wonderful relationship. I love the intellectual challenge and processing the future for our city. And so these are the reasons that I want to continue. I want to continue to serve and use my experience. We have accomplished great things in Southport, and we're planning for the future, and I want to be a part of that future. And so I appreciate this opportunity. And lastly, you know, the leadership of what I have shown these last 2 years, I think is crucial that we have someone who has that experience and the leadership ability to move our city forward. Thank you.
All right. Excuse me. All right. Thank you very much. They gave me a new mic. That okay with everybody? All right. Your challenger, Mayor Hayden, is Rebecca Kelly. Now you get... That's the noise you'll hear if I don't beep in first, by the way. Your challenger is Rebecca Kelly. You get 2 minutes right now for your opening statements. Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to come talk a little bit about the issues and get the truth out there for everyone. My name is Rebecca Kelly, and I am a Southport businesswoman. I grew up here in Southport. From Southport Elementary, I went through school, left town for college, and was able to gain the experience of managing businesses, not only with my own business here in Southport, but also businesses around the country. And I'm able to bring that experience back to Southport. This is my hometown. I love Southport, and it is a place where I've invested personally with my family. I'm raising children here. And who can multitask better than a working mother? We have the opportunity to make sure Southport is the best town in North Carolina on our coast. We have the ability to put forth a strategic vision with actionable items to move us not only through the next 2 years, but 10 years, 20 years, and beyond. Because if we want our town to be someplace where your grandchildren and great-grandchildren continue to want to visit, then we need to take steps now. My leadership through running a business during the pandemic, keeping the business doors open, keeping the business viable, looking for grants, working with the banks, negotiating those items makes me a wonderful leader to move us forward and not just look in the rearview mirror. Our plan needs to look to the future beyond just emergency services to get our town where it needs to be. I'm Rebecca Kelly, and I'm asking for your vote.
Time it. Sorry. This will be all of us getting used to hitting the button. All right, for the remaining questions, you each get 75 seconds to respond. These questions were submitted by the people of Southport. Some of them are lengthy. I can repeat them if you need me to. We're going to start with you, Ms. Kelly, for the first question. Here it is. Given the rise of COVID-19 and now the Delta variant, a mayor must make difficult decisions in leading a city, balancing public health concerns and its economic life, as well as following state mandates. What do you see as the leadership role or job of the mayor in creating and implementing mandates regarding the virus and building community support?
Thank you, Randy. COVID-19 has been a challenge for everyone. Certainly 2 years ago when this began, we didn't know what to expect. Our mayor made the decision to close our businesses in Southport. As we learned what was going on, as people learned about the science, we remained closed beyond even the rest of North Carolina. We have to balance our public safety and our thriving business community. It can't be a one or the other proposition here. If our businesses die, our town dies. We have to follow what our laws say, and any law that is written, I am happy to make sure we are following as it should be. I don't feel that it is the mayor's responsibility as a single person to create a mandate that takes away your personal rights. When there is an opportunity for an elected body to put forth a law, it is something that must be followed. Thank you very much.
Agreed. All right, Mayor Hayden, you will get 2 minutes for this as well. Would you like me to repeat the question? All right.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that we are already the greatest city in North Carolina. So, I mean that with all sincerity. And secondly, in terms of the pandemic, this is where leaders have to rise up and make a decision. This is where you use your education, your experience, your strengths, and what you believe is right for Southport. Southport was an at-risk population. There was the ability under the law for the mayor to declare a state of emergency. And that state of emergency protected our citizens. It saved lives. It saved disease. It kept our hospital from being overwhelmed. And if you don't know that the mayor has that ability, then you're not familiar with city government. And what we also did is that we had a special Board of Aldermen meeting, and they voted unanimously to give me the power. I already had the power, but they voted to support me on the decisions that I made. In terms of July 4th, for example, we postponed it twice. I made that decision, but I had the authority from the Board of Aldermen, and we protected our businesses so they could have the biggest summer ever. People came to Southport because they knew our cases were low, our city was safe, and that we had done the right thing. And I will always make the best decision for our citizens every time, regardless of the political ramifications. Always. That will never be an option. And for me, you know, the pandemic is not over. And so to have a mayor who is a doctor and who is a public health advocate to continue in that role, to me, is the right way to go. And I hope you will continue in that regard. Thank you.
All right. We're going to switch gears a little bit with the next question right now. And we're going to start with you this time, Mayor Hayden. This question: what do you see as the major infrastructure needs of Southport? How would you prioritize them? And what role does the mayor play in this policy area?
The role that the mayor plays is that he's the leader of the city. He is the highest elected official. So he helps to promote policies, regardless of what they are. And he works with the city manager, city staff, city employees, and listens to the citizens. Our infrastructure projects, I think you've all heard them and have them memorized. I know I do. The greatest, of course, is our waterfront, the waterfront stabilization. And we have $5 million after I've worked with Representative Miller on that to stabilize it. You've seen Bay Street stabilized. West Brunswick Street has been stabilized. Our roads, our water and sewer. You know, we replaced the sewer under Howe Street. We have paving to do all over this city. Infrastructure in terms of burying power lines. So these are some of those major issues. But let's not forget, infrastructure includes like our hospital, it includes BCC. It includes the maintenance of our buildings, including this building. So the infrastructure issues are large, but we will face them together with funding.
All right, thank you, Mayor Hayden. Ms. Kelly, do you need me to repeat the question? What do you see as the major infrastructure needs of Southport? How would you prioritize them? And what role does the mayor play in this policy area?
Our infrastructure needs dire repairs. We all know that as we drive around Southport. Can you hear me? Because it is on. Okay. The $5 million waterfront stabilization that Representative Charlie Miller has placed into the budget is something that Representative Miller championed. It is something that will only come to us if our state passes the budget. What's the backup plan right now? The current mayor mentioned that the hospital is part of that infrastructure here. Are you not concerned when the 4-lane road comes to Southport that we lose the 1% over Medicare that helps our hospital stay viable? A plan for our future needs to include our waterfront, our city water, sewer, power lines, and the ability to run fiber optic to bring in potential new business into town. Thank you so much.
Very much. We're going to switch gears to housing now. This time we're going to start with you, Ms. Kelly. The question, given the dramatic increase in housing in the Southport area, what's your perspective of the Unified Development Ordinance, and what recommendations, if any, would you have for the planning board going forward? What do you think the role of the mayor is in this?
Because of the housing boom that we see, our planning board has taken steps lately to make sure that we are not overrun with what is going on in our town. I have to give them credit where credit is due. The role of the mayor is championing those items and helping to become a liaison for those people who are interested in buying and developing our town. The planning board must look very closely at changing zoning from where it is to what developers would like it to be. Changing from a lower density to higher density zone could be detrimental to our city and our citizens. But just saying no is not the right answer. We have to create plans for smart development and make sure we're bringing all stakeholders to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hayden, do you need me to repeat the question? All right, given the dramatic increase in housing in the Southport area, what's your perspective of the Unified Development Ordinance, and what recommendations, if any, do you have for the planning board going forward? And also, what is the role the mayor should play?
The Unified Development Ordinance is a living document, and we just had a revision of it, as you know, this past year. And in that document, it is a guideline on how we protect and mitigate development. We can't stop it, but we can mitigate growth and development in the right direction. We can guide it in the right direction. And we have a strong, for example, tree ordinance. We're protecting our tree canopy. The planning board does their research. They take the project, they listen to the developer, they hold committee meetings, they hold a public hearing before it even comes to the Board of Aldermen. The mayor's role is really to hold the meeting when these developers come, because we have 2 board liaison members. And so I listen to them carefully, but I also lead the way in terms of how do we guide development in the right direction, just like we have done in these previous developments. And the other thing that I did in terms of traffic, my job is to reach out to DOT to help guide them in putting the roads in that we need for this.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Hayden. Thank you very much. We're going to keep this about housing for a little bit, since we're got a lot of questions about that, actually. We're going to start with you, Mayor Hayden. This one is about the housing boom and the cost of housing in Southport. What are your ideas on ways the city can encourage workforce housing? That is housing that is affordable for people like emergency workers, restaurant workers, and teachers.
The housing boom in Southport is phenomenal. I don't know how long you've been following it or you've been here. I know many of you bought your house not last year. You've been here 5, 10, 15 years. And I don't think, in particular, any of the people that grew up in Southport would think that a house on the corner, pick any street in the village, is now 1.2, $700,000, $800,000. I mean, so in terms of affordable housing for people that work in the city and that type of thing, our restaurant workers, our nurses, that type of thing, we need to partner with a developer who is willing to build these type homes and apartments and things like that. And we have places on the outskirts of our city and some in the city that we can do that. So I think we should try to promote that. But the city doesn't control the housing market at all, and it's phenomenal growth right now.
Thank you, Mayor Hayden. Ms. Kelly, do you need me to repeat that for you? Some of these questions are long. Yes. So given the housing boom and the cost of housing in Southport, what are your ideas on ways the city can encourage workforce housing for people like emergency workers, restaurant workers, and teachers?
The cost of housing is increasing exponentially here in Southport. My husband and I were able to buy a house in Indigo 8 years ago when we moved back to the same neighborhood where I grew up. We happened to catch Southport at a time that before this incredible boom happened, which allowed us to be in town. Many of my friends have had to move outside of town. I think that there are opportunities that working with the county, working with our citizens, and working with private investors to find areas where we can build what I, in my head, have called hospitality housing. It's a broader thing than that, but looking at using some commercial real estate ideas in the private housing market with a weighted rent like we do sometimes in our commercial business district. So there's an opportunity there to work with those developers and find the people who are interested in helping those people call Southport home.
All right, for both of you, this is going to give you a chance to expand on what you were just talking about. The question is very similar, but I want you to go a little bit more in depth. The question will start with you, Ms. Kelly. In addition to workforce housing, what are your thoughts regarding a shortage of low-income housing as a problem for Southport? What would be your best suggestions for addressing the issue, or do you not consider it an issue?
Low-cost housing is certainly an issue for Southport. I tried to hire staff members at my hotel throughout the year this year and had a hard time finding people who lived in town and were willing to work there because they couldn't afford to live in town. I mentioned just before looking at, as I said, hospitality housing. It's broader than that, but many of our hospitality professionals who live in Southport make very good money in the summertime when they're making good tips, but in the wintertime they're not making as much money. So by using that, what I mentioned before, the commercial idea of a weighted rent, we might have the opportunity of taking the burden off of those citizens who are working in our restaurants and putting that on the owner or the developer of those properties. The owner might still collect the same amount of money throughout the year. It's just a different weight, and it's the owner of the property's responsibility to deal with that weighted amount for their mortgage rather than those people who are in the hospitality or service industry. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Hayden, do you need me to repeat that? So in addition to workforce housing, what are your thoughts regarding a shortage of low-income housing as a problem for Southport? What would your suggestions be for addressing the issue, or do you even consider it an issue?
It is definitely an issue, and it is an issue for every coastal town. It is whether it's Charleston, whether it's Southport, whether it's Wilmington. And what I envision is that the city has identified this problem, and that we work with developers who have a sense of duty that we can solve this problem. They would have to cooperate in a way that almost altruistic and also from the heart to build homes that are affordable, to build apartment complexes that are affordable, and I think it can be done. And I think it would work for the city, for those that live and want to work in the city, and for the developer. They just have to think of new ideas and ways of making it economically feasible. And I think with help of federal government funding and state, I think it can be done.
All right, thank you, Mayor Hayden. All right, the next question is about environmental issues. We're going to start with you, Mayor Hayden. The question is, what environmental issues do you see Southport facing? And what is your assessment of the enforcement efforts of the city regarding environmental ordinances?
My record on the environment is very clear. My platform when I ran was for the health of the city, and part of that platform included the environment. So the biggest environmental issue that we faced in Southport, in which I faced directly, was the Capital Power plant that was here. There's the acronym that I've told you about before, TDF, Tire Derived Fuel. They were burning railroad ties, and they were burning tires. And so this was going up into our environment, and storm water from that plant was going into the canal at Duke Power. So we don't know exactly what was in the water, what was going into the air. It was covering our neighborhoods. So I worked towards the closure of that plant, and they have closed it. And now I'm working with the decommissioning of that plant to make sure it's done properly, that the testing is done properly, and working with NCDEQ. So I'm very pro-environment, and that's one of the biggest issues that I faced, and we've done well with that. We'll continue to do so.
Mayor Hayden. All right, Ms. Kelly, do you want me to repeat that for you? Well, then turn the mic on. All right, it's about the environmental issues. The question is, what environmental issues do you see Southport facing, and what is your assessment of the enforcement efforts of the city regarding environmental ordinances?
Southport has a few different environmental issues. There are a couple that I just want to touch on briefly. Number one is our water. We all know that Gen X has been an issue in this area. We buy water from the county that is right now doing the reverse osmosis system in order to help protect our citizens. We are buying into that. So I think in that aspect, Southport is doing well. Southport didn't sue as a separate entity for recouping some of the money for the Gen X issue. And then the other thing, just briefly, is our trees. Part of the reason people fall in love with Southport is our trees. As we cut down our trees, not only do we lose the oxygen, carbon dioxide processing, but we also lose some of the stormwater assistance that we get from those trees, from those roots taking up the water here. The tree ordinance is now in place. However, when the city makes a mistake about something, we have to be able to say we made a mistake and we're going to make it right. It can't be it's my way or the highway. We have to work with our citizens to make sure
Ms. Kelly, we have to cut you off there. Thank you very much. You do get to start with this question next. And this is a hot button issue for coastal towns across the country. So the question is, what is your perspective on the recently passed city ordinance regarding short-term rentals in Southport?
Thank you for that question. So I am on record for being for short-term rentals with regulation that help protect the character and safety of our city. We had the opportunity to include stakeholders on both sides of that issue when we were creating that. However, not everyone's input was taken into account. Because the ordinance has since passed, it is not my place to go in and change an ordinance as it stands, unless the citizens rise and show that that's something that needs to be done. I think that we had an opportunity that we missed, and I'm not in a position to go and revisit that at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hayden, do you need me to repeat that, or are you ready? All right.
Thank you. In terms of the short-term rental ordinance, my mayoral candidate spoke against the ordinance. She was not for the passage of the short-term rental ordinance and spoke publicly against it. To me, this is where you have an opportunity to show your leadership skills, your experience, and you can stand up and make the right decision for the common good or for the self-interest. And that's what I think happened on that situation. We know that the ordinance was passed. There was public comment. It went through the planning board. It went through the board of aldermen. There were several public hearings. And the short-term rental ordinance is to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. And that it's not to deny short-term rentals, but to not have further short-term rentals in our neighborhoods. It was the right decision. It was for the common good and not for self-interest.
Thank you, Mayor Hayden. That went well. Thank you both. All right, the next question is one a lot of people had. Y'all were waiting for that question, weren't you? All right, the next question is one that many people have asked about. It's pretty simple, and we're going to start with you, Mayor Hayden. It involves communication. Of course, that's very important to running any local government. What do you consider rather, to be your communication skills, and how have you or would you use them in working with various city entities?
Communication is the key, and one of the things I wanted to institute when I became mayor, there are multiple items. First of all, this is being live streamed, and you can watch it at any time. It's being taped, because I wanted those that could not be here or cannot be here. Every citizen can look at this tonight. Every citizen can look at our Board of Aldermen meeting. In terms of communication, I wanted the city to have a newsletter. We have a newsletter. I've written 12 columns so far. We have Southport Connected. That was something that I felt was important. We can get information out. I have done probably 30 video updates and happy to do them. I've written them, and I'm so proud of our Department of Tourism and Communication, because we work as a team to get this message out. So we are, compared to 2 years ago, we're getting more information out to our citizens than ever before. And my phone number is on the city website. I get calls from people who live here and people who don't live here, but I communicate, and we're getting our message out more than any mayor has ever before.
Thank you, Mayor Hayden. Do you need a repeat? All right.
Communication is how we move forward. Communication is how we can help understand each other. And communication is not posting a video with your comments turned off so the public can't say what they feel about that. We have the ability to open up our discussions beyond a public comment where our citizens can ask questions that are then ignored before decisions are made. We have the ability to answer those questions during discussion amongst ourselves, during the Board of Aldermen meetings where we are in front of the citizens and can address the concerns and the questions that they have. We need to make sure that communication is a two-way direction. Communication is not me telling you what I think you should know. It is a conversation and goes well beyond one way. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for that. We're going to let you talk a little bit more about your version of government with this next question. Ms. Kelly, we're going to start with you first. The question is, what is your vision of a transparent government, and how does the current Southport government rate on a transparency scale?
So I think that goes back to the communication that you were just talking about. A transparent government goes back and forth with its citizens, not just what do you think about right here in this meeting. It's an open dialogue with all stakeholders, not just those that showed up at that particular meeting. Decisions need to be made in public, in front of our citizens, and not behind closed doors. When our citizens feel heard, they feel included and invest in our city. We have the ability to make sure everybody feels included, and it's not just a few whose voices are heard. We can open ourselves up. I've got business cards with my cell phone number, and I am interested in hearing from you, and I thank so many of you who have already reached out to me to share your frustration with the current administration and the transparency that you feel is lacking in our current administration. We can do this.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Mayor Hayden?
Thank you. In terms of transparency in communication, what I mean is that in terms of information, getting that out to our citizens is the biggest part of transparency, and we do that. In terms of communication, we don't make decisions behind closed doors. We have public comment, and as you know, under my administration, there's no time limit on public comment. We have public forums. We've had several where our citizens have been involved, and we do have the back and forth. And we will have workshops continued in that regard where the public can hear. And one of the things that we're going to institute for our Board of Alderman meeting, we're going to have another layer of public comment in terms of when our citizens comment, then there will be board comments. So there will be that back and forth. So that's going to be something new that I'm going to institute. But we get information out. We don't make decisions behind closed doors. Our public has the opportunity to speak at every board meeting, and there's no limit on the time that they get to speak.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor Hayden. All right, I have good news for both of you. We're at the end. You now have 90 seconds, each of you, to speak to anything else you would like for the voters of Southport to hear. It's a 90-minute wrap-up with anything we haven't covered and a final chance for you to say what you'd like people to know about your potential administration or your current administration. We're going to start with you, Mayor Hayden, and end with Ms. Kelly. You get 90 seconds when we're ready. The AV Club is having a moment. Ready? All right, Mayor Hayden.
Thank you. This is an important election, as you know. Every election is important, but there are clear distinctions between candidates, between all candidates, and I want you to make the distinction in the mayor's race. I have been mayor for 2 years. I have the experience, I have the knowledge, I have the education, I have the leadership skills. I have led this town through a pandemic. We have recovered from a hurricane, yet we have made accomplishments through all this. And the decisions I have made, you look in retrospect, have been the right ones, particularly with the pandemic, and I'm certainly proud of that. We did not talk much about historic preservation. I've been here 36 years. I know the history of this town, and we will preserve it. I have a proven record of accomplishments. You have to look at that. It is so important. Have we done the things we said we were going to do? In terms of waterfront stabilization, I know that she said that Charlie Miller, Representative Miller, championed that. Where do you think he got the $5 million number from? He called me and I said, this is what the estimated cost was from the engineer report. So I'm involved. I know this city well. I love this city. The citizens know me. I know them. I love this town, the citizens, and everything about it, and I need to be your mayor for the best way forward.
All right, Ms. Kelly, final statements from you.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. You care about our city like I care about our city, and that says a lot for where we can go. I am a businesswoman. I learn from the best. I can negotiate. I can find funding. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I can say I need assistance and reach out to our citizens to tap into the smart people that we have here. We can get a plan together for our future. When I went to Raleigh to sit down with Representative Miller and Senator Bill Rabin, they were excited to have someone in Raleigh from Southport speaking to them. As I go to talk to all of our county commissioners about Southport, I'm making sure that Southport is part of the conversation, that we have the ability to get funding when the opportunity presents itself, and we are not left out of that conversation. I, with my own business, have pushed through the worst of times. I'm excited for the best of times, to hear your input in what you believe our vision is going to be, and to work with the Board of Aldermen and our city staff to make sure we can get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you. I cannot remember this button. I know how y'all did it. Good job.
turns it on when you want.
All right, everybody, now we're going to get on with the next part of the candidates forum here. This time for the Board of Aldermen in Southport. Same rules apply. Hope your phones are off. Candidates, you're going to get an opening statement at 2 minutes each. After that, you get 75 seconds for each question. We will begin at different places with each of you when each question is answered, so that each of you will get an equal amount of time to consider your answer. We're going to go with Ward 1 and then Ward 2. We're going to have a little bit of a round robin between each side. We're going to start with, yes, of course, don't forget, there is a microphone thing happening here. You have to hit the button on there when you're ready to talk, and please turn it off when you're finished. And we do have somebody here who's going to tell you when you need to, and somebody right here who will show you your time. There you go. And I will cut you off, just so you know. And everybody in the audience, again, please, no applause, no booing, no comments from the audience during all this. There are a lot of candidates here. We're going to try to get through this as quickly as we can and let everybody talk to you about what's important to them and the city of Southport. We are going to start with the opening statements. Again, you get 2 minutes for this. We start with Ward 1, and our first speaker is going to be Mr. Robert Carroll. Your 2 minutes start now, and you can take your masks off here at the desk.
Good evening. I'm Robert Carroll, and my family and I live at 307 East Nash here in Southport. I'm running for Board of Alderman, Ward 1. When I started this campaign, before I ever made the announcement, I sent out a letter to all the registered voters in the city of Southport. I did that because I wanted to know what was most important to them. I wanted to hear directly from the people I'd be serving. What I got from that was a ton of survey responses. Phone calls and text messages. You know, it made me proud to be a part of this great community. But from all of that information I gathered came my campaign, a campaign that starts with infrastructure. We've heard about it tonight. We're going to continue to hear about it. It's a good buzzword, right? It's not just the roads, though. It's infrastructure we don't see. It's our stormwater that needs to be studied. It's our sewer that's in need of repairs. But we can't just focus on that. We need to make Southport more fiscally responsible. We need to find other ways to get money, and we need to manage it better. In doing so, we also need to make Southport more affordable for the people that live here. We can't neglect the people that live here. And we've got to protect Southport's charm. We've got the greatest neighbors. We've got beautiful trees, historic homes. I promise that what I did with that letter was to show you how important communication was. If I'm elected on November 2nd, if you choose to elect me, I promise to continue that line of communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Next to Karen Mosteller.
Thank you, and thank you. Is this working? Okay. Thank you, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for having us today. I'm Karen Mosteller. I currently serve on the Board of Aldermen. I've been serving for 6 years. Previous to that, I served on the Planning Board. I always say that, like most of us that did not grow up in Southport, I wasn't born here, but I got here as quick as I could. So I love this town. My commitment to Southport began with the purchase of my home. I did a 3-year restoration that grew into a sense of belonging and a commitment to my community. And I am and believe I have shown that I am committed to serve and to work with citizens and other members of the community. And I am I'm grateful to be here, and I am grateful for the opportunity to serve and would like to continue to serve.
Very much. Next to Vicki Potter.
Hey, I'm glad y'all came, and thank you for being here. I'm Vicki Potter. I live at 511 East Moore Street. I personally have been in Southport for close to 50 years. I guess you could say I pretty much grew up here and went to school here, and I've been involved in the community throughout that time. I was involved with the 4th of July committee, and but my qualifications, I guess, would be that 10 years ago, my husband was on the board, and he left. He was deployed to go to Afghanistan, and I finished out his term. I was on the board for about 11 months, and I learned a lot during those 11 months. And but I also worked for the city. I was actually the manager of the community building, and I did that for 9 years. I just retired last year. So I believe I have an inside view of what happens between the two entities and how they get along. But I also love Southport very much. I want the town to be the best it can be. And I hope that we can all work together. And I hope that you agree with some of the things I have to say tonight. So we'll see. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. And now to Mark Spencer.
I want to welcome everyone here. Appreciate the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. It's very important that we get our issues out and we discern who's who and what our views are. Thank you, Randy, for being here. A son of Southport. I said that right. Close. Randy is not only from Southport, but he's from multiple generations of Southport. And very proud of him that he has found the job that he has locally. I am the luckiest man in Southport. I grew up, born in 1970 on Cape Fear Drive. I was blessed with men and women who were my mentors all my life. I was a strange young man. I liked stocks and politics at a very young age. When others were out fishing and doing that kind of thing, I was helping my neighbors with political campaigns. A lot of people, a lot of years. So this is not my first experience in the political realm. I appreciate everything that they did for me. I learned over the years all the sacrifices that the people of Southport gave to make it this way. What I want to tell you is that it's not all good. We have always had problems. The problems are hidden in the way we raise our families, we educate our children, we send them away to college, and they have nothing to come home for. And I believe that we need to address our situation. I believe we're in an identity crisis between being a tourist society, which is the new thing, and the hardworking community that we really came from. I appreciate you being here and look forward to answering the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. We're going to move to Ward 2 right now. We're going to start with you, Mr. Adams. This is Nelson Adams, and this is your introductory 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to have you here this afternoon. Again, appreciate the league inviting me for my 23rd time, and just glad to be here. My name is Nelson Adams. I live at 303 West 10th Street, Southport, North Carolina. I was born and raised in this town, and I like to say that I wasn't only born in Southport, Southport was born in me. I love this town and I love this people. I want to return to serve the people in a manner I did the 30 years that I was on the boat. We made a lot of accomplishments, and I see them drifting away. There's a fraction of people in this community that believe that their voice is not being heard. They're crying in the wilderness, and I've been asked to come back and steer this city on the right course. All you have to do is to check my record and see the accomplishments that we made that when I was on this board. In this very place we sit right here, when the former place burnt down, we gathered together as a community and we built this beautiful place here in Randy, and we paid for it, I think 2 or 3 years before we were supposed to pay it off. And I've been instrumental in doing a lot of things in Southport, even when people didn't want the waterfront park. I was instrumental and I was a leader and said we needed, I was a visionary to say, hey, one day something like that's going to be wonderful for us. So I'm here again asking that the people of Southport support me, and I'll guarantee them one thing. If they'll stand by me, I'll stand up for them. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Rich Alt, you are next.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Alt, and let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm not going to go through my whole resume. I'm going to put that in an ad in the Port Pilot, and you can look at it and decide whether what I've done in my life would contribute greatly to this town or not. That's up to you to make that decision. And my wife, Deborah, who's sitting over there, certainly the better half of the two of us. We have been associated with Southport since 2005. I have 40 years of state, local, and federal public service. I've worked at all those levels of government. I think that brings me to have a fine understanding of how to reach out to all those levels of government. Recently, I was over at the county, and they were talking about something about Southport, and there was nobody from Southport there. There was nobody from the government there. And I was kind of shocked about that whole thing. So we have to do, we not just know the name of Pat Sykes or whoever it is that you want to throw a name out. You actually have to have coffee with them. You have to have talk with them. You can't have the regional manager of or the regional director of North Carolina Department of Transportation come down here and surprise you with what he's going to be putting in. That should have been known for years what they were planning on. What made me want to run is the fact that I saw that we needed some modernization. I'm going to really quickly, hopefully we'll get back to it, Howe Street sewer project. The contract was poorly written. It does not meet the standards of the county or the state. Didn't have penalties. We didn't do a TIA, which is a traffic impact analysis. Didn't have milestones, didn't have penalties, didn't have bonuses. It simply needs to be improved. That and the fact that I want to to make sure that we grow responsibly. That's on my signs, and I'm hoping to, and the future questions will allow me to expand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. Rhonda Davis is next. Ms. Davis. And a reminder, Ms. Davis, if you're not using your microphone, we need to turn them off. Please. Sorry. Thank you.
My name is Rhonda Davis. I was born here in Southport, North Carolina. I was privileged to be the daughter of the first black elected official in Brunswick County and the first black elected official in Southport as a Southport Alderman, James H. Davis. My mother, Marcel, worked at Ocean Trail Convalescent Center, and we had, I thought, the greatest home in the world. Home. I've seen Southport change a lot since I was a little girl. And so when we talk about changes and we're talking about the character of Southport, we got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. The board, the current board and administration have made many strides and will continue to make strides. My educational background, I graduated from HBCU. I went back and got my MBA. And I've worked in this community. I served 2 terms on the planning board. I'm the chairperson for the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee, 28 years in the school system, retired August 1st. Great opportunity to do something for the community. I taught local government accounting at Bladen Community College. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I was the vice chair of the Brunswick Tomorrow Strategic Plan. I am here for the citizens of Southport. I want to serve you. I want to take everything that I have in me, everything that you all have given me, and I want to give it back to you. I want to be a part of this community, and win or lose, I will still be here working for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And finally from Ward 2, Laura Sharkey. Ms. Sharkey.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Laura Sharkey. I'm the incumbent for Ward 2 right now, whose seat is up for election. I feel I'm the best prepared to serve the next term because I've been doing the job for the last 4 years, and I've learned a lot. It's been an interesting 4 years. The first two were rather normal in that typical government and such, the issues that we dealt with, and then the last two have been kind of topsy-turvy with pandemic, brushed in there. And then how do we continue to provide services? How do we have businesses function? How do we accommodate people and all that? So it was challenging. But because I have my 4 years of experience, I have other experience serving on boards and being a government employee, I know, first, that it's a team effort. There's no I in this government thing. It shouldn't be, because it takes a team. It takes staff, it takes other elected officials, it takes partnerships to really run a city and to run it well. So first thing I offer up, I'm willing to be cooperative. I'm willing to go out and work with people. I'm willing to expand relationships, develop new relationships and partnerships to do what we need to do here in the city. There's a myriad of issues facing us, and all of them involve funding, all of them involve long-range planning, all of them involve thinking and collaborating with others to get it done. And I'm willing to do that for another 4 years because I have good experience that I think would be a shame to waste if I didn't serve another term. So appreciate your time, and that's why I'm still going to seek a seat.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. All right, to all of the candidates, the next section, you each get 75 seconds for each question. We're going to start with Ward 1 again. Many of you mentioned infrastructure in your opening comments. We're going to start with that. We're going to start with you, Karen Mosteller. The question is, what do you view as the major infrastructure needs of Southport, and how would you prioritize them, and how do we pay for them?
Hold on. What were the...
What do you view as the major infrastructure needs? How would you prioritize them, and how would you pay for them?
Okay. Well,
And I can repeat the question for anybody.
Well, we have several infrastructure needs, as everybody's aware of. Most recently, I'll start. Of course, we've got the waterfront stabilization plan that we've already heard some details about. Well, we just recently had a complete analysis done of the water system, so we know what pieces of the puzzle we're going to have to do there. We just, the city is applying.
Ms. Potter, excuse me, Ms. Mosteller, can you wait one moment?
I'm sorry. Am I out of time?
No, you're not out of time yet. Just hold that thought. We're going to reset the timer here real quick.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. We just recently are applying for a grant to do the same thing for our sewer system. And then once we do a complete analysis of the sewer system, then we can take those reports and meet with the county to see what items of that we have to upgrade to in order for them to take those systems over. So that's that infrastructure. Our roads are going to be an ongoing project, needless to say. Let's see, what infrastructure? It's in prioritizing. So many things need prioritizing all at the same time. There's sort of like you have to eat the elephant. Underground electric, that's another thing. Annually, we have been dedicating about $800,000 a year to underground coming from the electric fund. So we did not do that last year because of COVID, the LGs.
This time you are out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you for your understanding. We're going to go next to Ms. Potter, and if you need me to, I can repeat the question.
Please.
What do you view as the major infrastructure needs of Southport? How would you prioritize them, and how would you suggest we pay for them?
Okay, so of course the roads. We all know the roads are terrible. That would be top priority to me, but there are other issues as well, such as the sidewalks. I think the ones that sidewalks need to be ADA compliant. I'm assuming, because I'm not in the know of it, that we would have funding from the state as well as grants and stuff like that to help pay for it. But the roads would be top priority to me. and bringing the sidewalks up to compliant, but also underground electric wiring and stuff, and I'm glad to hear that we are doing that. So yeah, the roads definitely, I get a headache every time I go down Howe Street, so yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. Next to Mark Spencer. Mr. Spencer, and I can review the question if you need.
No, thank you. You know, we have a lot of infrastructure problems. We've been trying to build a sidewalk out to Walmart since I got here, and every year something seems to come up to where we can't build a simple sidewalk. We get sidetracked. We get to where we're putting oil to the squeaky wheel. We're being very reactive rather than proactive. Wastewater treatment, we've analyzed where the pipes are, how old they are. They've educated us as to which ones need to go first. Then they mapped out the water system, as Ms. Mosteller mentioned. Underground power, definitely important. On Cape Fear Drive, probably the next area that they'll go to. My mother had a power line disconnected from one of the power poles. Pole fell down. Power lines going through oak trees. Storms come, trees rot, power goes out. Really the big issue that we really don't realize is the infrastructure of what will be needed in the future for our electric system as these electric vehicles and this change in the mode of transportation that we take. It's going to require upgrading all our service feeder lines. And we ought to need
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you off right there.
Power lines. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Robert Carroll. Mr. Carroll, you're next. I can repeat the question if you need to.
So infrastructure is an issue, and you'll hear talks about cutting costs, better managing our money. The reality is we need to find ways to get money. You hear talks about the tourism industry being a bad thing, a negative thing. We're not a resort community, but we are a place that people want to come and visit. We're all here for a reason. We need to find ways to tax those people that are coming here. Not just the people that are visiting on day trips, but the people that come into our town every single day from the massive developments along 211. You know, there are some interesting options out there. Prepared meals tax may be an option. Paid parking, I don't know if anybody's going to mention that. But paid parking, if it works, if it's the right thing for the people of Southport, I will support it. I will not support it unless it's free to our residents, our business owners, and their employees.
Mr. Carroll. We're going to move to Ward 2 right now. We're going to start with Rich Alt. Mr. Alt, I can repeat the question if you'd like. Yes, the question is, what do you view as the major infrastructure needs of Southport? How would you prioritize them, and how do we pay for them?
All right, because we've only got 90 seconds, I'll do this as quickly as I can. The first thing I do is I review all the infrastructure capacity. The city did a wonderful job of doing a review of the water system, as previously has been commented on, but it was based on current capacity. It's not based on a developer coming in here and doubling the size of the population in one development alone. It does not take that. We don't know. We know that the vast majority of our sewer system, not just Howe Street, vast majority of our sewer system has a number of cracks in it, and every time it rains, it fills up, which dumps between 1,000 and 9,000 gallons worth of sewage into the 9th Street lift station and into Cottage Creek. For money, you should all know that currently the county is reviewing all 150,000 parcels of land within Brunswick County, and so through 2022, they're going to be deciding what the reassessments are. It'll start on January 1st, 2023, 15 months from now. I would think that most of our properties will go up assessed value between 30 and 40%. Some will go up much higher than that. And we have to figure out how we're going to balance all of that.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. Next is Rhonda Davis. Ms. Davis.
One of the things is the waterfront. We have to continuously look at our waterfront to maintain it, because without the waterfront, tourism probably would not be as great as it is. So we definitely got to maintain that. The second thing is our sewer system and the pipes, and I'm not that familiar with the detail, but I do know that we have to bring it up to standard before the county takes it over. So that's money too. And where that money comes from, there may be grants involved, there may be loans involved, but there is going to be some funding. The other thing, a long-term strategic plan is needed for the after-school daycare and the senior citizens. We have a growing population of seniors. Certainly the after-school daycare, if you've ever been there, it's a small building, and we need to start looking at doing something that is going to be long-term range planning that will help mothers and fathers who are working, and give the children a place where technology is upgraded to where they can use that technology to move through the system, homework and so forth during their time. One of the things that I would like to see done, of course.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I'm sorry I have to cut you off there. Next, we have Laura Sharkey. Ms. Sharkey, and I can repeat the question if you need me. The question is, what do you view as the major infrastructure needs of Southport? How would you prioritize them, and how do we pay for them?
Okay, I'm going to answer this with the traditional term of infrastructure is going to be sewer, roads, water pipes, electrical, stormwater systems. Southport has a tremendous need for continuing to upgrade the sewer system. All our lift station pumps need to be replaced, and we know that right now. So that would be my number one priority, is to make sure that's funded and completed. We have road conditions that we're aware of that need to be repaired. What kind of water line repairs might be able to be done in that same area coincide with that, so before you do paving and digging up, we coordinate that. Additionally, stormwater is something that we want to look into in the future because we don't have a citywide stormwater management plan. We definitely need one. But our electrical system, as far as the grid resiliency, needs to be examined, and there's more to that than just doing underground lines. So there's stuff to be worked on in all those areas. We need to look at ourselves eternally for funding, but we also need to consider outside sources of revenue and whatever grants we can access. But grants almost always require matching funds, so that's why we have to have a good, healthy reserve in-house to get those grants.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. We have to cut you off right there. Next, we have Nelson Adams. Mr. Adams, do you need me to repeat the question? Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say we're being repetitious when we ask the question about infrastructure. Of course, it includes, as been forestated, the street surface, the drainage, the underground, the sidewalks, the tree trimming, new lighting, and all that. I do know this, that there hasn't been a sidewalk laid in Ward 2 since I left, and Chief Police used to call me a sidewalk king. But we need to, we're going to have to leave Southport and rub shoulders with the people that's got the money. We can't sit here and complain. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to reach out to all these agencies that can be assistance to us, and they're mostly in Raleigh, and our representatives and legislators, and ask them to come on board and help Southport, move in the right direction. For so long, we have been secluded. We were scared to venture out from these walls, but we're going to have to move out if we're going to look for assistance in different areas.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. All right, many of you have talked about infrastructure and sewer systems since we've been up here. So this next question is a little bit long, but I think it's a good one to move into. We're going to start with Ward 2 this time. The question is, Mr. Adams, we will start with you with this, okay? The question is, recently, Southport reported a spill of over 6,000 gallons of raw sewage from the 9th Street lift station into Cottage Creek. The city said the cause was a heavy rainfall, but that, quote, all pumps and controls were working as designed, suggesting that heavy rainfalls could lead to more flooding and more raw sewage discharges. It would pollute a very important watershed in the area. What are your thoughts on remedying this and any other sewer and flooding problems?
Well, my thoughts would be that we bring in our engineering assistance from engineers and to see the maximum, what we can sand with our lift stations. We have had problems with them in the past, and we've overcome it, and we just can't do it alone. But we have to have the people in the Pacific, range to advise us on which way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. And again, I can repeat this question. I know it's very, very long. Mr. Alt, you are next. Do you want me to shorten it up there for you a little bit? The question is about the recent spill of sewage into Cottage Creek. The city at the time said that all pumps and controls were working as designed, which suggests this could happen again. The question really is, or what are your thoughts about fixing this problem and any other sewer and flooding problems in the city? Very much, and a real quick reminder while we're doing this, the mic's on and off, just so everybody can hear. We're going to go to you next, Ms. Davis, and do you need me to repeat this a little bit for you?
No, okay.
Thank you.
I really don't have a solution to this situation, but what I'd like to say from my experience that a study by the engineers of all our lift stations should help us to help the board, including myself if I'm on the board, to make sound decisions about what we have to do in order for improvement and what the cost is going to be. But I think a study of all the lift stations should resolve this issue at some point.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Ms. Sharkey?
Yes, the lift stations are all underpowered. Our pumps are 15 to 20 years old. They're under the capacity for the flow that they need to push, and so that leads to our spillage problem. The other factor in all that is that we have infiltration by rainwater. That's what's coming through the cracks. So when we have heavy rains and whatnot, we get additional flow. So it's not just sewage that is trying to move. It's all the combined water of sewage and rainwater. So we have identified that we have to do major repairs on the sewer system. This is something that has not been maintained, and that's the problem. We have a lot of things that haven't been maintained, and they're all breaking now. So we have to prioritize, dedicate the funds to it, and make the commitment to follow through on it and not change course from year to year. That's really the key.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Ward 1 right now. Again, I can repeat the question for you. We're going to start with you, Mr. Carroll. Do you want me to repeat the question real quick?
I grew up in the country, and I know how to change oil and rotate tires and run a bush hog, but I don't know much about a lift station. What I would say is that this is not acceptable. I'd like to change the subject and make you aware that for a while now the city hasn't had a city engineer. We now have that as part of our budget. That's going to save the city, the taxpayers, a lot of money. I'm excited about that. This is the type of job that a city engineer can do the right thing, can fix the problem for us so that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Ms. Mosteller?
Well, I don't really have anything to add to everything. He's right that we did this year budget for a city engineer to add that to staff because of all of our needs. And it, of course, is unacceptable. And this is symptomatic of the overall sewer system and some of the issues that we've got to address from an impact.
Thank you, Ms. Mosteller. Ms. Potter?
Well, it is true that Southport does not have a maintenance program for anything. Buildings, roads, lift stations. And it's my understanding that they are in pretty bad shape, so I think that needs to be one of the priorities. And quite honestly, the flooding is an issue in this town. I'm not sure if it's an issue with this particular instance, but we do not keep our creeks clean so the waters can run, and that's an issue. So yeah, we definitely need a maintenance program, and this needs to be on that list.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. And a reminder when you're finished with your mics to turn them off. And finally, Mr. Spencer, do you need me to repeat the question?
Heard it a few times. Randy, I wonder where you got that quote, that pump station was in good shape. Information comes out of the city in multiple directions, and I would completely disagree with that statement. My understanding of that particular pump is that it works at a fraction of its capacity, and that we have 10, 12, 14 pumps around town, and that we need to be replacing a pump station every year for the next so many years. So we need a plan. The money comes generally from Raleigh if we can work with our legislators. But those are the not so glamorous things that people don't get so excited about when you talk about politics, about fixing a sewer pump station. But those are our problems. We got a lot of them. It is what it is.
Mr. Spencer. All right, coming out of that question, we're going to switch to something similar. We're going to talk about the environment. We're going to start with Ward 1. The question is, give your assessment of Southport's environmental ordinances, what concerns, if any, that you have about Southport's enforcement of ordinances regarding environmental aspects of the city. We'll start with you, Ms. Mosteller, and I can repeat the question.
Environmental ordinances. That's the question?
Yes, ma'am. And these questions come from voters.
Okay.
The question is your assessment of the city's environmental ordinances and what concerns you have, if any, of the enforcement of those ordinances.
Well, from an environmental standpoint, I know that protection of our areas of environmental concern is one of our core values. So I can say that. Ordinance, stormwater ordinance, when we're talking about environmental ordinances, I'm guessing they were talking maybe about stormwater. I do know that our stormwater ordinance within the UDO is stricter than the state's. That much I know. I've not really had, most of our conversations around environment are really, we've dealt with capital power and those kinds of conversations. So that's all I got.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Carroll now. This is designed to keep you all on your toes.
Yeah, a little uncomfortable, but good. So I've heard a lot of talk about the environment. I've met with people through this process who have talked about the fact that our happy little seaside town still allows plastic bags and single-use plastics in our restaurants. I'd love to see Southport become a recycle community where that's not the case, where we're not using single-use plastics. And there are a lot of restaurants and other facilities around town that have. So while obviously we don't have a lot of ordinances regarding environmental protection, we need them. We need to find ways. However, we can't put the burden of cost on our small businesses. You know, as a business owner myself, it's important that we do everything we can to support the community and to be here for the people, and it's not inexpensive doing so. So I support the idea of finding creative ways to continue to protect our environment, to protect our waterways. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Spencer? You like that?
Sometimes we find ourselves getting outside of our lane. Southport does not have a scientist on staff. Things of this nature. You have a state environmental quality that oversees these things with large staffs with specialties to know what's what. We did have the coal ash situation that was fixed, and I'm glad to see that being repaired, but it was more of the Department of Energy, Environmental Quality that was overseeing that than for us to say what should and should not be done. We have a tree ordinance. We fined someone $6,000 the other day because they cut trees when we couldn't give them a permit in time, and they went ahead and cut trees, got fined $6,000. I grew up, my mother told me never cut an oak tree. I didn't need an ordinance to know that. But we're becoming a very regulatory community instead of taking care of it for ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Ms. Potter?
Well, we do have the tree ordinance that regulates that, and they're very important to us. I think we do need more of a tree doctor in town, I guess. I can't think of the word right now, but thank you, arborist. One that can go around and name the ones that we need to really protect. But there are issues just like the lift station that was messed up. You know, we need to work on those issues, the maintenance problem. The waterfront needs to be worked on, as well as a recycling program here in town. I think that's very important. But as far as ordinances, you know, we can only do so much. You know, you can put recycling bins all over the place, but if people don't use them, then there's not a lot we can do about it, but we can at least provide it for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. For Ward 2, I'll repeat the question before we get started. It is, please give your assessment of Southport's environmental ordinances. What concerns, if any, that you have about Southport's enforcement of ordinances regarding environmental aspects. We're going to start with you, Ms. Davis.
Well, I'm not really up on the environmental piece of it, except for the tree ordinance, stormwater runoff, the waterfront. But we do have a lot of experience with the sewage spillage when we have excess water or rain. And I think that we need to have someone, again, come in and take a look at our environment as a whole in our city and help us to start to develop a plan for an environmental assessment so that we can have ordinances that would adapt to what we're needed here in Southport.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Alt?
I'm not aware that Southport has any ordinances at all on environment, but we have a lot of issues, and I'm going to go through them really quickly. CPI. When CPI came up, I'm not endorsing any mayoral candidate, but I'm going to tell you that I worked with the current mayor. So CPI came up, and the mayor, before he was the mayor, and I happened to be at the same meeting when we realized that the creosote poles and the tires were burnt. I started writing letters to the editor in great detail about the toxicity, and I'm always going to screw up this word, the fact that the burning of those materials can cause mutations in newborn children. This was a big deal. Two people sitting on this panel right now chose not even to endorse a resolution condemning CPI. That's the fact. So I worked with Joe Pat on that issue. Gen X, we know about that. The city chose not to join the lawsuits against DuPont, reasons I have no idea. And as previously mentioned, I also brought up the fact of the 9.2 mile canal that CPI has been dumping toxic waste into, and we have no idea what that looks like.
Alt. Ms. Sharkey?
I think there's maybe confusion between ordinances and policy. The city certainly has policy regarding environmental control, water quality, how development should be done to reduce the impacts on our environment so that we don't infringe on the wetlands and so forth. As far as ordinances, I would say the tree ordinance is the first one that comes to mind that's environmentally based. I'm pretty sure we have a law in the books that says you shall not dump oil into the waterways. But there's not an extensive amount of ordinances because we don't really have the authority to go into that area of expertise. The state does, the county has the health department, and the key is communicating when we know there's a problem, working with the agencies that we have at our disposal, and that's basically what I did with the capital power circumstances. I worked with the state water management person that was reviewing capital power and updating their permits, and to make it as stringent as possible. In fact, it was going to be the most stringent policy in the state on stormwater control for a plant like that. They were authorized by the state to operate.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. We're going to have to cut you off right there. We're going to move to Mr. Nelson Adams. Mr. Adams?
Yes, I don't know that we have a huge environmental problem. We have state agencies and county agencies looking over what's going on. I do know that years ago we thought we were doing such a great thing when we came in with curb and gutter. We found out later on that that was a negative contributor, to the waterways and all that. So we haven't had any more of that. I know that again that state agencies are watching over CP&L, and they did a terrific job in closing down the chip plant. And I really don't see a problem, or I'm not versed about a major problem with environmental.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I heard one of you mention in your answers the UDO, so our next question is about that. The question will go first to Ward 2. The question is, are there changes to the Unified Development Ordinance that you would recommend the Planning Board take? We're going to start with you, Ms. Sharkey.
The Uniform Development Ordinance just went through an extensive rewrite. It incorporated state-mandated language. It made it more condensed, easier to find things. It was also reviewed. It was allowed to be commented on by public pretty extensively, and I think that's a fair document at this time. I don't have any personal, and I wouldn't have any personal items that I would push to have done differently in the UDO, but we do find from time to time when the document is used that there might have been a miswrite, or the outcome, the impact is not what the intent is. And so when those things come up, and that'll come up from the planning board using the document, then it might be appropriate to make a change in the UDO.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. Mr. Adams? I told you we were keeping you all on your toes. Yes, sir. Are there changes to the Unified Development Ordinance that you would recommend the Planning Board take?
Not at this particular time. I don't have any that I would recommend that they change. I do know that I was a member of the first UDO that was ever written, and I do know that we frequently went back and had to adjust every 3 months. We were adding and deleting. So I know what the UDO is, but it's not written in stone. It could be changed at any time, and it is a thick Bible, and I cannot, recommend any changes in it as I stand right now.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Ms. Davis?
I also was on the planning board at the time that they did the first UDO. And as I remember, like Nelson said, the document is a living document, but there's changes over time that must take place based on what's going on in the community at that time and what's needed. You can't put everything in there. You're going to leave out something, but the one that they have now is more comprehensive and easier to read. So no, there is nothing at this time that I think should be changed.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And finally, Mr. Alt. I can repeat the question if need be.
I sat through the line-by-line UDO. I've been to every meeting that this body has. Obviously, the incumbents have all been at those same meetings, but of the other who are not incumbents, I've been to almost every meeting in the past 2 years, whether it's a UDO, whether it's the budget. So it's not necessarily changing the UDO, it's how you are going to apply it. So PUDs. I'll give you an example. Osprey Landing. There are members of this board sitting up here tonight who allowed the developer to have his zoning from R20, which is 1.8 houses per acre, go to a PUD. They never looked at the plan. He said 125 houses he'll put in. Once he got the PUD, it's 196 houses. We cannot allow that kind of management from the city level. A high density because we just allow willy-nilly to vote for a PUD and to allow the builder at that point almost as free reigning to go do what they want to do. And the people that live up in that part of the city are clearly aware of Osprey Landing and how that system fell apart.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. All right, we're going to move to Ward 1 right now. I want to repeat the question for you. Are there changes to the Unified Development Ordinance that you would recommend the Planning Board take? And we're going to start with you, Ms. Potter.
The only change I would make right now, I know the UDO is a living document and it changes periodically, but it does appear to me that it is, it benefits the builders more than it does us. So I would like to at least put at the very beginning of the UDO that the decisions are made by the board, the recommendations by the planning board, that whatever the decisions are made to the benefit of the citizens of Southport. I think that needs to be printed first. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. Mr. Carroll?
Specific changes to the UDO. I think our issue with the UDO right now is implementing the UDO, making staff aware of what's in it. For example, campaign signs. I'm exhausted by them already, and I've probably got more out there than anybody else. No one fully understood what the language was regarding within the UDO regarding campaign signs until I kind of brought that to the forefront, and staff made everyone along here aware of that. That's just one example of we need to make sure that people are aware of what's in the UDO and that staff is enforcing it properly. The comment earlier about I don't know if it was $6,000, but recently a couple was charged $4,000. It's an ordinance. It's a law. It is what it is, and we must enforce those laws.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Spencer?
Letting me follow him. The sign law that he mentioned was a mistake in the UDO. It said that you could only have one candidate sign in your yard. So if you supported more than one individual, technically on the UDO that we just wrote, you could not support more than one person. So you have to look at that. You have to look at the letter of the law, or you can look at the purpose of it. So sign law is in error. We need to look at zoning and multifamily homes to bring in affordable housing that we talked about earlier in our gathering. And then the short-term rental situation, we shouldn't have a stamped, this area can be the only place that you have short-term rentals. I think we should have an advisory committee that the neighborhoods decide, the people decide, not us. Our problem is that we can't handle our own business anymore because we don't know our neighbors and we can't talk to them. And so we have to have Big Brother regulate us. And it's getting worse and worse every day.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. And finally, Ms. Mosteller.
Thank you for this opportunity. I don't know where to begin. I will tell you this, we spent 2 years updating the UDO, so it is far better. The reason everybody refers to it as a living document is because you cannot anticipate everything that's going to happen in the future. You can't write a document that way. Talking about the short-term rental ordinance, the short-term rental ordinance has to be in the UDO because the state will only allow us to regulate through land use. That's why it's the way it is. And neighborhoods that have covenants which we have several neighborhoods that have covenants that don't allow them there, then they can regulate them because they have covenants that supersede that. It's the stricter of the two apply. So that's as far as the short-term rental ordinance goes, and how that worked in there. We have currently, there are some things that are being worked on in the planning board that will update in the UDO. One is the yacht basin parking overlay district. There's also working on recommendations with creating a local historic commission. We learned a lot through the pedestrian corridor.
Thank you, Ms.
overlay.
Mosteller. We're going to have to cut you off right there. But guess what? We're going to talk about housing next.
Okay.
Y'all ready for this? All right, we're going to start with Ward 1. The question is housing. You everybody hear me? All right. First question, Ward 1. Given the rising cost of housing in Southport, what are your ideas on ways the city could encourage workforce housing? That is, housing that is affordable for people who work here, like emergency workers, restaurant workers, and teachers. Mr. Spencer, you're first.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, the zoning can be adjusted to bring in more multifamily housing, which is a little bit more affordable, and it'll provide for the working class. As we met over the last year, I meet with people, and they don't want a subsidized housing. They want a housing opportunity. They don't want just a place to live for cheap. They want the opportunity to flourish like everyone else. I would be interested in looking into having particular pieces of land like the Ferry Road property, where we designate a little bit of it park, a little bit of it commercial, and then let a developer come in and provide affordable housing, maybe supplementing the cost of the land for a 20-year period, and if they live there that long, they get a discount on the land on the purchase. We need to seek funding, housing and urban development. We don't do that. We're more worried about our tourist economy than we are our working class.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Mr. Carroll, the question is next to you.
We're struggling with infrastructure. We continue to have the conversation about just two ways in and out of Southport, and we're offering to bring in multifamily housing. The solution is not to look right here. It's to look to the county, to have the conversation with the county, to find funding through the county to make that work. Do we really want to put more stress on our infrastructure that we're already saying is failing? I agree we need to find alternatives for the people, for people to work and live in the same place. I just struggle to think that it's just our problem. I'd propose working with the county, finding ways and alternatives and money that way.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Ms. Mosteller?
Thank you. It's my understanding that typically when those kinds of projects get done, that has to do with tax incentives and those kind of special incentives that are either provided by a large city or a county. And I agree with Mr. Carroll that this we can hopefully have discussions with the county, but this is at a county level that has more resources and has economic development and those kinds of agencies. So hopefully that will, so maybe that could be our future. But the affordability here, we know what the challenges are. We live here, and it's just growing. The prices for housing, it just keeps getting higher and higher. So I do think this is a huge challenge, and it's certainly one that we ought to be concerned about.
Thank you, Ms. Mosteller, and now to you, Ms. Potter.
Okay, it is sort of, I mean, we can't sit here and say we don't want more housing to come in because our infrastructure is so bad, and then turn right around and talk to developers about bringing in more housing. It is true that it is a bigger problem than just for us, and we do need to move outside the county and talk with them and where they do have better resources than we do. The first thing we need to do is work on our infrastructure before we can actually bring more people in here. And I have to agree with Mr. Carroll as well. You know, we need to work with the county for that.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. Okay, we're going to move to Ward 2 now. I'll repeat the question for you. Given the rising cost of housing in Southport, what are your ideas on ways the city could encourage workforce housing, that is, housing that's affordable for people who work here, like emergency workers, restaurant workers, and teachers? We're going to start with you, Ms. Sharkey.
I believe this problem is something that needs a collaboration, and it's collaboration perhaps with Brunswick County, but also maybe our closest neighbor, Oak Island. I'm sure Oak Island is suffering with the same circumstances we are, where they need people of certain income levels to work, but they can't necessarily live in the region that they work at, and so they don't show up for jobs. I mean, that's why would you drive the whole way from Leland to work in a restaurant here when you could probably find a restaurant closer in Leland? So there's that. Because it's a bigger problem than Southport can tackle on its own financially, we have to figure out partnerships to make it happen. And to be honest, one of those partnerships might be a developer. It's not always going to be another government, but it might be a developer, and that's where PUDs come in. Vilifying PUDs doesn't make sense because that's just a planned unit development, and part of that development could be affordable housing.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. Mr. Alt?
So, I'm afraid that one of my benefits of me and one of the curses of me is I'm going to speak exactly what I think. I think the train has left the station. You will find out in 14 months just how much all of our houses going up, and I'm not sure there's that much land left in Southport to put workforce housing in there. I just happen to have attended a meeting with the county level, and they are struggling with the same thing. The issue that you have here is this is a Dillon state, which means we have no authority to do anything unless Raleigh says so. This whole thing, because it goes across not just Southport, is going to require some legislative changes to allow us to do more incentives with builders or put the arm on them to do things when they want to build here. And that's going to require all of us to reach beyond Southport, which is a traditional way we've looked at things, with all the communities around here, with the county, with all the counties, to see what legislation can be developed that will allow the individual jurisdictions to really negotiate with the builders when they come in, because we have no authority to do that right now. So that's the long-range plan that you have to have.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. Mr. Adams?
Well, I just believe that Southport is in a dying need for affordable housing, and I think it can be done in offering incentives, to developers to come in. But I refuse to believe that infrastructure is the reason that we shouldn't be seeking that type of housing for individuals. Now, where I live, there's 6 houses going up right across the street from me, and nobody's concerned about the infrastructure about that. I mean, doesn't matter. What matters is, I think, for some people, is who's doing the building. So I don't think that the infrastructure would stop me from seeking affordable housing for individuals in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. And with the last word on this question, Ms. Davis.
I think working with our state government and the House Representative Miller and the Senator Rabin, that we can actually get the legislation that we need in order for Southport to be able to work with the developers, those people that are coming in, to have affordable housing within the housing, that the multifamily or whatever type of housing that is going to be built. But one of the things I think we don't need to do is say that the infrastructure is a holdup. Yes, we need to continue to work on the infrastructure because it has to grow to accommodate what we have. But at the same time, affordable housing is like an emergency here in this small town. People are being forced out of their homes and can't afford to be in their homes, and we need to look at that. Teachers come here, but they can't afford to buy a home, even though there's a program for teachers through the state credit union. They still can't afford it because based on what they make. So we just need to think about long-term
Ms.
housing.
Davis, we're going to have to cut you off right there, but you can leave your mask off. We'll let you start with this first with this next question. Y'all been waiting for this one. Here we go. This summer, the Board of Aldermen approved an ordinance that limited where new short-term rentals could operate and added regulations to existing rentals. Are you supportive of this ordinance? Would you be in favor of rescinding it or altering it in some way? Ms. Davis?
I am 100% in favor of the ordinance because we have to start somewhere in getting some control over short-term rentals. Now, it is my understanding that you can still have a short-term rental. You just have to be a resident in your home. And so I'm not against it at all because we had to start somewhere. So I'm 100% for it as it is written at this time. But like I said,
Ms. Davis, I think we're having timing issues. Hold on one moment. We'll come back to you. That gives y'all more time to prepare for this, because I'm sure you didn't think about this at all before this moment. All right, we're gonna continue and let you have 45 seconds to finish, Ms. Davis.
okay,
Here we go.
like I said earlier, I'm 100% for it. Every document is a living document. We make adjustments to it, but at this time where we are, I think the ordinance should stand as it is until which time is something else that can be done if it needs to be done. But I think we're in good shape right now with the ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Alt? All right, Mr. Alt, thank you very much. Do you need me to read the question again?
No, sir.
Didn't figure you would.
I'm going to take a quick, easy out, but I'm going to expand on it. I'm going to ditto everything that Rhonda just said. I'm supportive of this document, of this ordinance. I think we needed to have a first step. It is an ordinance. This didn't come down from the mount and on tablets, and we can't change it. This is a law of men and women, and so it's a good first step. I have to admit that when I first was listening to the debate back and forth, I was kind of against the way it was being written, but as I sat down and looked at it, I think it's a good first step, and I think we need to continuously look at it to see how we refine it. But I'm with Rhonda on this one, and I believe that it's a good place to be at the moment.
Thank you. We're going to move now to Ms. Sharkey.
The policy, the ordinance that was brought to the Board of Aldermen, I felt was too stringent to begin with. I also did not think it was fair, the time frame in which it was brought to the board, the one public hearing that we had, and then it was up for a vote. I would have been more comfortable if we had delayed a vote on it and had given the stakeholders more time to comment on it. I also was a little disappointed that we didn't refer to a model that was already being used somewhere else in the state that had been, run through stakeholders and a legal review and things like that. So with that said, that's where I stand on it. I just think we took 2 years to do the UDO, and we didn't spend that amount of time in a public forum before we adopted that ordinance on short-term rentals. And I just don't think it got the fair review that it deserved. But having a method of monitoring and registering and all those things, I'm in favor of.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. And Mr. Adams?
Well, I think that I think it was measured into as a rush. I don't think there was enough discussion on it. I don't totally agree with it as it stands right now. You work 20 years to secure property, and 5 people tell you in 5 minutes what you can do with it. I don't think that's fair. I think there should have been a more open dialogue about it and discuss, and not entered right into it and made an ordinance where it could not stand. I would be very much for it to be opened again and discussed again.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. We're going to move to Ward 1 right now and start with Ms. Potter.
Okay, this is, it truly is a really sticky subject. I think it is, the ordinance that we have right now that was just passed, it is a little bit strict, from what I can tell. I do agree that we do need to regulate it. I think we need more conversation about it. I'm not in favor of short-term rentals unless they're in a commercial zone. I don't think they should be in neighborhoods. But I do feel like we need more conversation because I'm not fully up on it, and I need to talk more about it. But as of right now, I think they're fine in commercial zones, but not in residence. But I think this particular ordinance is kind of strict, and we need to look at that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. Mr. Spencer?
75 seconds is not enough to talk about this at all. It's very multiple angles to this. We have limited capacity. We can't bring hotels in. Nobody wants hotels. But yet we have a lack of places for people to stay. So we see that traffic going out of town because they have to go somewhere else. People work hard. There's some people in this, we're not all equal financially. Some are more blessed than others. Some might need this tool to protect their inheritance or their family property till maybe they're able to return. I think that we should let the communities decide rather than 4 people decide. There are a lot of angles to short-term rental. I think we should revisit it. I'm not against it, but we need to let the people have more say before we put a stamp on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Ms. Mosteller?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. The short-term rental ordinance is based on the Asheville model, so it is based on an existing ordinance. The planning board used the School of Government book on short-term rentals as guidance for this. They had, to my knowledge, at least 2 meetings, public comment meetings, at the planning board level before it came to the alderman level. It was first identified as a problem in 2018 by the board then. The reason we didn't act on it is we needed to update the whole UDO, and that took priority. So it was time for this to take priority. On page 14 of the CAMA land use plan, which is our comprehensive plan, it says that Southport is more like inland Brunswick County communities like Charlotte and Calabash than beach rental communities like Oak Island and Ocean Isle Beach. And if we're going to preserve that part of our historic character, which is our neighborhoods and our neighbors, and not become a resort town, then we have to keep this ordinance.
Mr. Carroll?
Wow. Yes, absolutely, Karen. Here's the aspect of this that I want to talk about, is community. I've heard things like we won't know our neighbors, or we don't currently know our neighbors. How does short-term rentals help that? How does short-term rentals aid in getting to know the people we live next door to? Miss Mary Ann, who the kids get to see every day, or Miss Sally across the street or Ed around the corner, or Miss Emma, who comes up on the porch and leaves an Easter egg. Community is a very big part of who we are. Short-term rentals and community cannot be part of the same conversation.
Thank you very much. And we got one more question, then we'll get to closing statements. This is an important one that I really wanted to get to tonight, and it's a little bit of a long one, but I think you all will be passionate about this. Although much of Old Southport, including the original 100 plots of Smithville, was placed on the National Registry of Historic Districts many years ago, there are currently no provisions for ensuring the preservation of the historic character of Southport homes. Would you be open to consideration of this issue for Southport, and explain why or why not? We're going to start with Ward 1 and Vicki Potter. Yes, I can. Yes, I know it's a long question. Essentially, much of Old Southport, including the original 100 plus of Smithville, is on the National Registry of Historic Districts. It was done many years ago, but there are provisions for moving forward. Would you be open to consideration of this issue for Southport? Why and why not?
Yes, I would be, because we need to preserve our history and the architecture of that time period and the historical aspects of our town, which is one of the biggest parts of the charm in this town, and we definitely need to go that route. Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Spencer?
I'm concerned about the historic overlay, not because I don't want to preserve the architecture, but there are some properties that have been taken down and new properties have come in that haven't had any kind of impact to change the character of Southport. Down at the yacht basin, there are a lot of new homes that have been built that blend in just fine, and we haven't had to have this overlay. And I'm worried that is going to, the cost of maintaining and keeping the historic quality is going to be so expensive that it's going to run the price up anymore. Reminds me of Williamsburg, and I told people we don't have the people to pay for everything to keep it up to that standard. And again, I think it would cause the price to go up, but I would be open to talking about it.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Mr. Carroll?
Not only do I support a historic overlay district, I support an entrance corridor overlay. These are important parts of maintaining the overall look and aesthetics of this wonderful place we live. Let's keep people visiting.
That was quick. Ms. Mosteller?
Thank you. We last year, maybe earlier this year, we had a committee to study the pedestrian corridor overlay district for the yacht basin, pedestrian corridor. And in that discovery, we also talked with Raleigh, the historic commission in Raleigh, and then also we talked with FEMA. If we will create a local historic commission, then some of our institutions like Provisions and Potters will, and if they're identified in a local historic commission, then if something takes them, they won't have to be built up on stilts like Frying Pan. They can come back in the way they are. So we can help preserve that part of our historic character by having a local historic commission. That's the only way to do it. And currently, the planning board has a subcommittee that's working on that very thing. Out of that committee, the Board of Aldermen sent it to the planning board for them to work on. So it's in the works.
Thank you, Ms. Mosteller. We're going to move to this side over here. We're going to start with you, Mr. Adams.
Well, I know a lot about, something about historical districts. I don't know now that we have a historical district, but all I can say is if you create one, be careful what you wish for. With that comes a lot of restrictions and a lot of responsibilities and a lot of restrictions on telling individuals what they can do, what color they can paint their house, what kind of shutters, what they can put on their porch and all that. So just be careful what you wish for. And if you move in that direction, make sure that you have a lengthy dialogue about what's going to happen, more so than you did about the short-term rental.
Thank you. Ms. Sharkey?
Mr. Adams was very succinct, and I agree that I'm supportive designating properties as historic or having a historic district if it's appropriate according to what the community wants to do, because they can tend to be very restrictive and they can become very elitist in their makeup of who can live there or who doesn't live there because of the cost to perhaps maintain a building according to whatever standard is set by a group of people that maybe have more of the means to provide to those houses than other folks. So I would want us to tread lightly and not just go into it heavy-handed first. We have to find out if the community's receptive to it and the people that own those properties are receptive to it, and then work on guidelines that are fair and don't cost or price people out too much of those neighborhoods.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. Mr. Alt?
I am interested in having that discussion, but that discussion is going to involve a lot of homeowners. And before the Board of Aldermen sits up here, is where they sit, and and allows a couple of public comments and no response back, there would have to be a lot of workshops. A lot of people would have to come into this room, not the planning, not the Indian Head where we have limited capacity. This would have to be a long process of bringing everybody in. One, for all of us to understand what the rules are once you do it. And two, how many people that currently live in those homes can afford to continue living in those homes. And then what does this all mean? So while I'm willing to look at the issue, I'm not willing to say that's what we're going to do, because I would want to hear from every single person that owns a house that was going to be impacted, and not at an alderman meeting. I'm talking about multiple workshops where there's real communication back and forth, because some people could end up losing their houses, and that's not, I'm not sure that's where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. Finally, Ms. Davis.
Because I'm not an expert on the local historic commission, I would say that the workshops would be needed for the communities to understand exactly transparency of exactly what it entails and any restrictions, and of course giving consideration to those, the haves and the have-nots. So the only thing that I would say is that let's talk about it, let's make sure that everybody understands it, and let's be transparent about it.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And the good news for all of you is we've reached our end. Many of you were cut off this evening, so you're going to get one last chance to say what you want to say. This last section, you have 90 seconds, a minute and a half, to wrap up everything, and one last pitch to the people in this room and the voters of Southport. We are going to start with Ward 2 on this. You have 90 seconds, and we're going to start at the end with Miss Laura Sharkey.
I appreciate you all sitting through this and giving us your attention. I really do appreciate it. I am a public servant at heart, and I've enjoyed my term as an alderman, and I would like to continue to serve because I'm an objective person. I want to bring that objectivity to all these different topics. I also understand the need for collaboration, and I have that willingness to go outside of Southport's borders to try to find new ways for us to get things accomplished. I have the time. I'm a full-time alderman. I have been for the last 4 years, and I will continue to be a full-time alderman. I love to communicate with people. I've held community meetings out in the early spring and really enjoyed my interaction. And I'd be very pleased to continue to do that on behalf of the citizens. It's really not so much about my agenda, but helping us become a better place to live and be better for everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. Ms. Davis. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Alt?
I want to ask something of all of you. because we have such short time limits to answer this, you'll notice that my voice gets really fast. And sometimes people take that as almost being aggressive, and I apologize. If you ever go to one of my meet and greets, you'll know that I could spend 2 hours just yakking and cracking with you. So the next thing I would like you to do is just to look at this coming next week's Port Pilot, because it'll have my resume in there. And then I'm going to go back to the reasons why I thought I wanted to be an alderman, and I still very much want that. I think that there's people up here that have been on the Board of Aldermen for 4 years, and I'm now just hearing about plans. I think you have to come in full speed. We had environmental issues that we didn't address correctly. I shouldn't say that for everybody, all the aldermen. I want to make sure I don't say that for all the aldermen. But there were, and certainly the city did take actions for some of the environmental issues, but I don't think they took enough. I truly think that we have to look at how we do contracts. I have, because we can't use props here, I have 3 pages of notes that I took from the county of how you write a contract for Howe Street. And we just need to include that. We have to have lessons learned. This is not finger pointing. The issue was done. We need to learn from it. We need to do a real assessment, and we need to improve on it. And it's not that hard to do it.
Just under the wire. Thank you, Mr. Alt. Mr. Adams?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'd like to thank the league again for having this. I'd just like to say that I love Southport. I was born and raised here, and I love its people. I'd like to think that over the 30 years that I served on the board, and 10 of those being vice mayor, that I did do something good. Somebody wrote a song a long time ago, and it says, "May the work I've done speak for me." You just check my record against these people's record. The people are talking about, well, you know, I've been on the board 4 years. Well, 30 years is more than 4 years. I have more experience collectively and individually than any individual sitting here, working with 5 mayors and numerous members on the city council. I'm telling you, I worked then, and I like to work again. I'll speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. Please vote for me, November the 2nd, for the vote all of them, Ward 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. From Ward 1, Mr. Carroll.
I don't think you were quite even on that, Randy, but that's another discussion.
They literally pulled out of a hat.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and for all of you who are here tonight, who took the time, everyone watching at home. You showed up to find out who we are, so that when you go to vote on November 2nd, you're informed, and that's impressive. You know, I first visited Southport 30 years ago, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the waterfront, the trees, the homes, the people, the shops, the restaurants. And I hope that in 30 years, when my children are raising their children here, that it's still recognizable, that it looks the same. And it's still very similar to the way it was 30 years ago. This is an important election, an election that can protect community and preserve Southport's charm. If I haven't already earned your vote, I hope you'll give me the opportunity to do so. I'm Robert Carroll. I'm running for Board of Alderman, Ward 1. If you'd like to know more about me or my campaign, www.electrobertcarroll.com.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Ms. Potter.
Again, thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here. There are a lot of issues here in town right now, and I can tell you that my 3 top issues are the waterfront, infrastructure, and a maintenance program. Not one is more important than the other. They all need to be taken care of and looked at. And I can sit here and tell you how much I love this town, because I really do love this town. But the bottom line is I want to be a part of a part of developing it for the future and for our children and for future generations. I really enjoyed the 11 months I had on the board a long time ago. I learned a lot, and I would love to be able to listen to you and find out what you want and bring that to the board, and all of us work together. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. Ms. Mosteller.
Thanks to everyone for attending and for caring about our community. This is an important election. The decades of slow change are behind us. We have outside pressures reaching in to our community. I will give you an example of how important zoning is. The marsh and the yacht basin, there was a plan to commercialize it and bring docks into the yacht basin and build boat lifts in front of the marshes. And it was our zoning, open space district zoning, that protected it. And that can be changed by the Board of Aldermen. That's how fragile we are to hold on to who we are. The short-term rental ordinance, part of that, trying to hold on to who we are so his children will recognize us in 30 years. We have seen, we lost 2.5 acres at the end of the West Street, which made up about 50% of what the city owned on the waterfront, and that was water access land. It's important who you elect, and please find out who supports what. I will tell you, I support the 5 core values.
Thank you, Ms. Mosteller. Very close. Very, very close. Finally, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you. I mentioned at the beginning that I was the luckiest man in Southport. It's my dream to serve the community, to lead like all those that were before me who showed me the value of helping and serving. I'm not always good at the table. Most of the time my ideas come when I walk away. But I do answer the phone, and I try to help people that have issues and try to solve them rather than regulate them. We are in an identity crisis. We have an argument between being a tourist community and a working class community. I believe that we've always been a working class community that has struggled to have sustainable wage jobs. And I believe that the sustainable wage job cures a lot of problems, because if I'm making enough money, I can afford to buy the house and I can afford to feed my children. I have a stake in the game. I have 4 generations living in this community right now. My father and my grandparents lived in this community. They made me aware of the issues. People question what I say. When they haven't lived here and I have, how do they know what my heritage is? It surely wasn't a wastewater treatment plant at the end of West Street. And the money we got there could buy 100 acres on the Ferry Road, but yet that was a big issue. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your vote. My name's Mark Spencer.